She is not the one I came to meet. Shin Jae-won said it quietly. That was the worst part, not loudly, not with cruelty, just quietly, the way a man states a fact he has already made peace with. Across the table, Adiz did not move. Her wine glass was halfway to her lips and stayed there. Her father looked at Jae-won. Jae-won looked at Ngozi. Ngozi looked at no one because she had stopped breathing 30 seconds ago and had not yet worked out how to start again. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The restaurant continued around them. Cutlery on plates, low music, the murmur of other people's evenings, indifferent to the fact that something irreversible had just been said in a corner booth in Cheongdam, and that 3 of the 4 people sitting in it were only now understanding what they had been moving toward for 4 days without any of them naming it. This is the story of how Shin Jae-won came to Seoul to meet the beautiful sister, and chose the doctor who didn't know she was being chosen. 4 days earlier, the elevator doors closed and Ngozi Obi removed the lanyard from around her neck with the same efficiency she used for everything. No ceremony, no second thought. She tucked it into her bag, smoothed the front of her burgundy top once, checked her reflection in the polished metal doors the way a pilot checks instruments before descent, and stepped out into the lobby of the Shilla Hotel, Gangnam, looking exactly like herself. This was, in every way, the problem. The lobby was full of people dressed for performance, men in suits cut to signal, women in dresses calibrated to impress. The entire space hummed with the particular energy of people who were very aware of being seen and had organized themselves accordingly. Ngozi moved through it the way she moved through hospital corridors, directly, without performance, her eyes already scanning for what she came to find. She found him before he found her. He was standing near the far end of the lobby with his hands in his pockets, looking at nothing in particular, and the thing that distinguished him from every other man in the room was not the suit, though the suit was exceptional, and not the height, and not the angular precision of his jaw or the dark ink visible at the collar of his shirt. It was the stillness. The particular, practiced stillness of a man who had learned early that his presence alone was enough to fill a space, and had stopped needing to do anything extra to prove it. Shin Jae-won did not perform. He simply existed, and the room arranged itself around him. Ngozi walked toward him. He turned before she reached him, registered her approach without making a moment of it, and she filed this away with the same instinct that made her a good diagnostician, a man who noticed things before they announced themselves. "I'm Ngozi," she said, "Adiz's sister. She's stuck in traffic, 20 minutes, maybe 30. She said to tell you she's sorry and to make sure you're comfortable." She looked around the lobby briefly. "The acoustics in here are terrible for conversation. There's a rooftop bar on the 14th floor, or you can wait here if you prefer." He looked at her for 1 full second, not the way men usually looked at her, assessing, cataloging, deciding where she fit in a hierarchy of relevance. He looked at her the way she looked at a new case file, with the specific attention of someone who understood that the first information was often the most important. "Rooftop," he said. They went up. The rooftop was quieter than the lobby. Seoul spread itself out in every direction, glass towers and Han River light, and the particular density of a city that had decided it would never stop building. Neither of them looked at it. They sat across a small table with drinks that arrived without either of them ordering dramatically, and Jae-won said, "What do you do?" "Infectious disease research," Ngozi said. "Asan Medical Center. Fellowship program originally 3 years ago. Now I'm on the research team. Antimicrobial resistance patterns in post-surgical infection." "Which department head?" She told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The Shin Group has a hospital subsidiary in Bundang. There's been an internal debate for about 6 months about the infectious disease protocol, specifically around the isolation ward admission criteria. My medical board gave me a recommendation last quarter that didn't answer the actual question." Ngozi looked at him. What was the question? Whether the current criteria are creating a bottleneck that's increasing cross-infection risk rather than reducing it. She did not hesitate. "Yes, they are. The admission threshold is too conservative. It's keeping patients in general wards longer than necessary while the isolation capacity sits at 60%. The bottleneck isn't the criteria, it's the discharge protocol on the other end. You're filling from the top without clearing from the bottom. She picked up her glass. Your board was looking at admission. They should have been looking at flow. Yi-won was very still. My medical board, he said carefully, spent 6 weeks on that question. They were asking the wrong question, Ngozi said, simply, without apology, the way she said everything that was true. Something crossed his face, not quite a smile, not quite surprise. Something in between, the expression of a man encountering an answer that was better than the one he had been prepared to receive. They talked for 53 minutes. About hospital infrastructure and the gap between policy design and ground-level reality. About Lagos and Seoul, and what it meant to build cities with ambition faster than the systems could absorb. About what it felt like to work inside institutions that were solving yesterday's problems with the tools they had designed last decade. He asked questions that had nothing to do with making conversation and everything to do with wanting to know. She answered all of them with the same quality of attention she gave her research, complete, unembellished, honest. At no point did either of them mention why they were both in this hotel on this particular evening. At no point did either of them need to. Adiz arrived 43 minutes after she said 20. She came through the rooftop bar entrance looking exactly as she had prepared to look, not overdressed, precisely dressed. Every detail a deliberate choice made by a woman who had been rehearsing this entrance in her mind for 8 months. Her smile when she saw Yi-won was warm and calibrated and real in the way that things which have been practiced long enough eventually become real. Yi-won stood. He was introduced properly. He performed the evening correctly, attentive, appropriate, everything the occasion required. He asked Adiz questions and listened to the answers and said the right things at the right moments and was, by every external measure, exactly the man the arrangement had required him to be. But across the dinner table that followed, 3 times in 90 minutes, the conversation arrived naturally at places where Ngozi's answer was the relevant one. He directed questions to her without emphasis, without making them pointed, as though the discussion simply kept finding its way back to territory she knew better than anyone else at the table. Each time, Ngozi answered without looking up from her food. Each time, Adiz's voice arrived 2 seconds later, warmer and more elaborate, redirecting the current smoothly back to herself. She was very good at it. She had been doing it her whole life, occupying the space that Ngozi left by not being interested in occupying it. Their father sat at the head of the table and watched all of this with the expression of a man who had spent 40 years reading rooms and was reading this one with great care and no visible reaction. Ngozi left at 10. Ward round at 6. She said good night to everyone with the same quiet warmth she used with the hospital cleaning staff, genuine, unperformative, entirely without awareness of its own effect, and took a taxi back to the apartment. She had no idea she had just upended something irreversible. The following morning, Yi-won sat in a business breakfast with the 2 fathers and understood with the clarity of a man trained to make decisions under pressure that he had already made one in a hotel rooftop bar the previous evening. He did not announce this. He signed where he was asked to sign, and then he said, casually, to the room that he would like to arrange a tour of the Shin Group hospital subsidiary for the family. The father said yes immediately, with the enthusiasm of a man who understood this as a romantic gesture toward his elder daughter. It was not. The tour. Yi-won walked every department of the Bundang subsidiary with Ngozi beside him and said almost nothing to anyone else for 2 hours. He asked her questions, real ones, operational ones, the kind that his own executives could not answer with her precision. She answered all of them. At one point, she paused in the corridor to speak to a nurse about a patient she recognized from a referral 3 months prior in Korean, using terminology that made the Shin Group medical director, standing 3 feet away, look up with undisguised surprise. "How long have you been speaking Korean?" Yi-won asked quietly as they moved on. 3 years, Ngozi said. I learned from patience. I know how to say everything that matters and nothing that doesn't. He absorbed this without comment. On his other side, Adiz walked the tour in heels that were inappropriate for hospital floors and made conversation that was intelligent and entirely correct for the occasion. He responded to her. He was present with her. But his body was angled slightly, consistently, toward Ngozi, the way a compass needle angles toward north without being instructed to. Adiz noticed at the 40-minute mark. Her expression did not change. Something behind it began counting. That evening she went to her father. She did not arrive with accusations. She was too strategic for open accusations. She reframed. She was concerned, she said, that Ngozi was inadvertently making Yi-won uncomfortable with the constant medical conversation. She didn't understand the social register of these occasions. She never had. It wasn't a criticism, it was simply how Ngozi was. Maybe she should sit out the next dinner, just the formal business one, nothing personal. The father agreed. He told Ngozi the next dinner was business only, family not required. Ngozi did not question it. This was entirely consistent with how the family had always managed around her. She was the one who got excused from social obligations because she was always working anyway. She thanked her father, went back to her room, and read a journal article about antimicrobial resistance patterns in Southeast Asian clinical settings. She did not know she had just been removed from a room she had already changed by entering it. The business dinner. Yi-won arrived, scanned the table once, sat, made conversation for exactly 4 minutes and then said quietly, not loudly, but not carefully enough to the father, "Your younger daughter isn't joining us this evening." The father said she had a work commitment. Yi-won said, "I would have valued her perspective on the distribution infrastructure discussion. She has a precise understanding of how the hospital subsidiary operates at ground level that I haven't been able to get from my own team." Nobody spoke for 3 seconds. Adiz looked at her wine glass with the specific stillness of a woman performing neutrality under extraordinary pressure. The father looked at Yi-won. Yi-won looked at the menu as though he had said nothing significant. He had said everything. After dinner, he called the apartment from his car. Ngozi picked up after 2 rings. He asked if she was available the following morning to continue a discussion about the subsidiary's procurement structure. She said yes. It was a legitimate professional question and she had opinions about it. She did not know this was not about procurement. Morning. A coffee shop near a sand, small and quiet, the kind of place that did not require reservations or performances. Ngozi arrived in her work clothes, ward round in 2 hours. He was already there. He stood when she entered. He asked her nothing about procurement. He said, "How long are you planning to stay in Seoul?" She looked at him. "I don't know, as long as the work requires it." What if there were other reasons to stay? She was quiet for a moment. Not because she didn't understand him. She understood him precisely, which was the reason for the pause. She was a woman who had learned, through years of being underestimated and overlooked, that assumption was the enemy of accuracy. "I would need those reasons to be clearly stated," she said. "I don't navigate implications well. It wastes time and it leaves too much room for error." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stated it. Directly, completely, without performance. He told her that he had come to Seoul expecting to close a business partnership and manage a social arrangement with reasonable efficiency. He told her that he had not been able to conduct either with any efficiency whatsoever since a Tuesday evening in a hotel rooftop bar, and that this was sufficiently unusual for him that he had stopped trying to explain it away. He told her he was aware of the arrangement with her sister, and that he intended to speak with both fathers directly. But he had wanted to speak with her first, because the decision concerned her most, and she deserved to understand it before anyone else made it into something other than what it was. Nobody breathed. She sat with it the way she sat with a complex diagnosis, turning it over, examining its edges, making sure she understood the full shape of it before she responded. Then she said, "I'm going to go home and tell my sister. I can't not. I want you to know that before you leave this table." He said, "I know." A pause. That, he said, is one of the reasons. But before we continue, and what comes next is the moment this story has been building toward. If you are watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time. What Ngozi does in that room with both fathers at the table and her sister sitting across from her, you need to have watched from the very beginning to understand why it lands the way it does. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop your answer below. Did Adiz deserve better? Or did she lose something that was never actually given to her? I read every single comment. Everyone. Back to Seoul. She went home. She told Adiz everything fully, without softening a single detail, because she was constitutionally incapable of holding a truth back from someone who deserved to hear it whole. She told her about the coffee shop. She told her what he had said. She told her what she had said. She told her what she felt, which was the hardest part because Ngozi had spent 29 years not talking about what she felt in rooms where someone else's feelings were the priority. Adiz listened to the entire thing without interrupting. She was very still. When Ngozi finished, the silence lasted long enough to become a presence in the room. Then Adiz said, "You could have not told me." Ngozi said, "No, I couldn't." Adiz stood and walked to her room. The door closed behind her. It did not slam. That was the worst part, the door closing with the quiet, final click of something being held under control that had every right to break. Nobody slept well in that apartment. The family dinner arrived like a verdict. All four of them, both fathers, both daughters, at the restaurant in Cheongdam. Ngozi sat across from Adiz. Both fathers flanked the table, and Jae-won sat at the center of it and said the thing that opened this story. "She is not the one I came to meet." Quietly, completely, the room contracting around those 8 words. Adiz set her wine glass down. Her father said her name quietly, a warning or a comfort. It was impossible to tell which. Jae-won looked at Ngozi and did not look away. And Ngozi sat with her hands flat on the table and understood that she was inside a moment she had not asked for and could not walk back from and would have to decide something in the next 30 seconds. She looked at her father. He was watching her with the expression of a man who had spent 40 years making decisions and was now, for the first time, watching one be made without him. She said, "Baba, in 29 years, has anyone in this family ever asked me what I wanted from my own life, and then waited for the full answer?" The table went silent, not because it was dramatic, because it was accurate. Every person at that table ran the question back through 29 years of family history and arrived at the same answer, and the answer was a silence that said more than any of them were prepared to say out loud. Adiz looked at her sister for a long moment. Something in her face shifted, not collapsed, shifted. The specific movement of a woman arriving, slowly, at the true shape of something she had been looking at from the wrong angle for a very long time. Jae-won looked at Ngozi from across the table. His cold mask, the controlled neutrality that had been his professional face for 5 years, had moved. The way a structure moves when it encounters something it was not designed to resist. He understood that she had done, again, exactly what she always did, arrived at the most precise point in the room without raising her voice. And he understood that he intended to spend a very long time making sure she was asked that question properly and heard fully, for as long as she would allow it. 3 days later, a car arrived at the Gangnam apartment. Jae-won's mother had flown in from Busan. She was 63 years old, had managed the Shin family through a decade of chaos, and was not prepared to stop being vigilant now. She had heard there was a Nigerian woman disrupting her son's arrangements. She had requested a private meeting. She expected ambition, calculation, strategic warmth deployed to gain access to a family like hers. She found Ngozi Obi sitting across from her in a coffee shop near the hospital, still in her work clothes because she had come directly from a ward round, who spent the first 10 minutes of the meeting asking about her health. Not politely, specifically. She had noticed, when Madam Shin entered the room, a particular tension in the left shoulder, the way she held it slightly higher than the right. the way she adjusted her position twice in the first 3 minutes. Ngozi had seen this pattern in patients. She could not ask. She asked, directly, what it was and how long it had been there, and Madame Shin, who had not been asked about her own body by anyone outside her physician in longer than she could remember, answered before she had decided to. They talked for 40 minutes, about the shoulder, about Seoul and Busan, about what it meant to build a life inside someone else's expectations and what it cost when you finally stopped. That evening, Madame Shin said nothing to her son. The following morning she called him. He picked up, well. A pause, long enough that he registered it. Then his mother said, in Korean, the sentence she had never said about anyone he had ever brought to her attention. She looked at me like I was a person. He called Ngozi that evening. He told her the arrangement with Adiz was formally concluded, cleanly, respectfully, with full acknowledgement of what she had invested in it and the genuine apology she deserved. He told her his mother had called him with a message he would not repeat verbatim but whose substance was that he had his family's support. Then he said, I am aware that none of what has happened this week was what you came to Seoul for. I am aware that you did not ask for any of it, and that it has cost you things it should not have had to cost you. I am not asking you to decide anything tonight. I am asking you to know clearly, so there is no implication left to navigate, that I intend to be a reason for you to stay. And I will ask you properly when you are ready, and I will wait for the full answer. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I have a ward round at 6 tomorrow morning. I know, he said, and a research deadline on Friday. I know that too. Yi-won. She said his name the way she said important things without decoration. I have spent my entire career being the most prepared person in rooms where I was the last one anyone thought to ask. I do not require rescue. I have always required to be seen accurately. That is the entire thing. Yes, he said quietly without flinching. I know. Then ask me properly, she said, when I'm ready, and I will give you the full answer. Adiz called her 3 days later, not to make peace. It was too soon for peace. She called because she had something to say, and she was a woman who, whatever else she was, had always been honest when the performance became too heavy to maintain. She said, I spent 8 months preparing to be chosen. You spent 8 months doing your actual work. I think I always knew which one of us was building something real. Ngozi said, you were following the map you were given. That's not a failure. That's faith in the wrong direction. A long pause. I'm not ready to be okay yet, Adiz said. I know, Ngozi said. I'm not asking you to be. She never competed, not once across any of it. She told the truth when the truth cost her. She held her ground without raising her voice. She asked to be seen accurately rather than chosen conveniently, and she waited, with the patience of a woman who understood that the right things did not arrive on the schedules you wished they would for someone to finally look at her the way she deserved. Being chosen is not the same as being taken. Accepting what is genuinely yours is not the same as taking what belongs to someone else. Weeks later, the same hotel. The same elevator. Ngozi stepped in and did not reach for the lanyard in her bag. She did not need to remind anyone, including herself, of who she was. The doors opened on the 14th floor. He was already there, standing with his hands in his pockets. The city enormous and lit behind him. He turned before she reached him. You came, he said. You asked properly, she said. He almost smiled. She noticed this time. Drop a comment below. Tell me what was the moment you knew Ngozi had already won before anyone at that table understood there was even a contest. And was Adiz the villain of this story, or a woman who was handed the wrong map and followed it perfectly? I read every single one. If this story stayed with you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You already know who that person is.